Less than a week after civil rights icon Congressman John Lewis was laid to rest in Atlanta, President Trump has made several controversial comments both about Congressman Lewis and his contributions to our country and the service at Ebenezer Baptist Church. This morning on Fox and Friends, he called the eulogy given by former President Barack Obama, quote, terrible.
I thought it was a terrible speech. It was an angry speech. It showed this anger there that people don't see. He lost control, and he's been really hit very hard by both sides for that speech. That speech was ridiculous.
There are those in power who are doing
the president also criticized the eulogy the day after the service. 4 living presidents were in attendance, including Republican President George W. Bush. President Trump was not there. Former President Obama touched on a lot of topics from voting rights and access to federal officers being sent to major cities to respond to protests. This seems to show President Trump doubling down after his interview with Axios got a lot of attention yesterday. It's something many of you are still talking about right now on our Facebook page.
How do you think history will remember John Lewis?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know. I don't know John Lewis. He chose not to come to my inauguration. He chose. I never met John Lewis, actually. I don't believe.
Do you find him impressive?
I can't say one way or the other.
In regard to the service at Ebenezer Baptist Church, 3 living presidents were in attendance, and former President Jimmy Carter, the 4th living president, did send a letter. This interview, though, about Congressman John Lewis took place last Tuesday as Lewis was lying in state at the Capitol. On CNN, the mayor of Atlanta says she was disgusted by the president's comments.